I'm Sarah, just a regular woman who's seen her share of life's ups and downs. For 24 long years, I've been the backbone of a family that didn't always see or appreciate my worth. My husband, Richard, has a bit of fame as a TV presenter on a channel that's barely hanging on to its viewers. Then there's my daughter, Emily, who at 18 thinks she's got the world figured out, and my son, Mark, who moved out to start his own life at 23. After spending the best years of my life making sure everyone else was taken care of, I decided it was high time to dust off my old dreams. I used to be pretty good with dogs, even trained as a handler once. So, I got a job at the pet shelter down the road. You'd think I'd announced I was running off to join the circus, the way Richard reacted. Working at a shelter, Sarah? Really? Have you lost your mind? Richard scoffed as he flipped through the channels, not even looking at me. It's just part-time, and I like it. It makes me happy, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady against his disdain. Happy? We're not teenagers, Sarah. Grow up. You spending time with those strays is embarrassing. What will people say? His words were sharp, cutting deeper than he probably knew. I wanted to argue, to scream that I had every right to do something for myself, but I bit my tongue. Fighting with Richard was like talking to a brick wall, only less rewarding. Emily was no better. She walked in, her phone glued to her hand as always, and rolled her eyes when she saw us. Mom, are you still on about that shelter thing? Why can't you do something cool, like start a fashion blog or something? Because dogs are what I love, Em. I thought you'd be happy for me, I said, feeling the sting of her words. It hurt that my own daughter found my passion so unworthy. Dogs? Really, Mom? That's just sad. You need to get with the times. She scoffed, her words dripping with teenage condescension as she flopped down on the couch. I sighed, looking over at Richard for some sort of support, but he was too busy grooming his image in front of the mirror, fussing over a spot on his tie. Richard, do you hear how she talks to me? He barely glanced my way, adjusting his tie. Well, if you acted more like someone her age could respect, maybe she wouldn't talk to you like that. That stung. It really did. The dismissal from both of them was a cold reminder of what my life had become. Ignored and underestimated. But no more. This job at the shelter, it was mine. It was something I loved, something that brought me back to life after years of being whatever they needed. I went to bed that night with a plan. I wasn't going to let them tear me down anymore. I was good with animals, and the shelter needed me. Maybe, just maybe, this was my chance to find myself again after all these years of being lost in the shadows of my family. Richard always had a thing about appearances, his clothes pristine, his hair just so, every aspect of his public persona polished to a sheen. I'd spent the better part of our marriage ensuring his suits were lint-free, the creases sharp enough to cut glass. Image is everything in my line of work, Sarah. You know that, he'd remind me constantly, as if I could forget. Lately, though, something in me had started to slip. I was forgetting things, simple things, like the exact way he liked his coffee or the time of his next broadcast. You're not getting any younger, he'd joke, but the barb was always there, hidden under his chuckle. This particular evening, tension hung over dinner like a storm cloud. Emily, ever the echo of her father, was busy texting under the table, barely touching her food. I served Richard his coffee, my hands shaky from the day's stress. Sarah, where's the cardamom? Didn't I ask for it? Can't you do one thing right? His voice was sharp, each word a needle prick to my already deflating spirit. I thought I added it. Let me fix that, I muttered, fumbling through the spice cabinet while he tapped his foot impatiently. Watching me, Richard let out a heavy sigh. It's like you're not even here anymore. You're just so scattered. The bag of cardamom slipped from my fingers, scattering seeds across the tile. Oh, damn it! I exclaimed, more to myself than to him. Richard rolled his eyes, and Emily let out a snort of laughter from the table. Mom's losing it, Dad. Seriously, she can't even handle spices. She jeered, her voice dripping with disdain. I'm sorry, okay? I'm trying. I said, my voice low, the embarrassment burning my cheeks. Richard's frown deepened. Trying? No, you're failing, Sarah. This isn't just about cardamom or coffee. You're not yourself. You need to see someone, get checked out. I can't have you falling apart on me. His words stung, the implication clear, I was a problem that needed fixing. Emily's laughter echoed in my ears, a cruel soundtrack to my crumbling self-esteem. I started cleaning up, the seeds a tiny mess among bigger issues. Maybe I should see a doctor, I whispered, not sure if I was speaking to Richard or trying to convince myself. Maybe you should, he agreed quickly, a little too quickly, as if the idea pleased him. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. I was there, but not really. Plates clinked, forks scraped, and my mind whirled with fears of dementia and doctors. After dinner, I washed dishes, the warm water running over my hands while my thoughts spiraled dark and deep. Richard and Emily retreated to his office upstairs, their voices a murmur through the ceiling. Alone with the suds and my spiraling thoughts, I couldn't shake the feeling of being fundamentally inadequate. Was I really losing my mind? The thought terrified me. Saturday had a way of sneaking up on you, all lazy sunshine and the promise of a little peace. I was cleaning up the kitchen, wiping down counters and humming some tuneless song when it hit me. I'd forgotten Richard's coffee cup in his office upstairs. My hands were still a bit damp as I reached the top of the stairs, my mind on autopilot, planning what to do next after retrieving the dishes. But as I neared his office door, voices trickled out, seeping under the crack like unwelcome water. I paused, recognizing Richard's voice, then Emily's lighter, laughing tone followed. Curiosity pricked me, urging me closer. Do you think your mother suspects anything at all? Richard's voice, usually so commanding on screen, sounded almost giddy. Emily laughed, that high, tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. Mom? She's too busy scrubbing floors and feeding those mangy dogs. She doesn't see past the end of her nose. Richard's voice dropped to a whisper, but his words were clear as crystal. Once I bring Miranda here, things will change. We'll be better off. You like Miranda, don't you? Oh, Dad, I love her. She's amazing, smart, beautiful, everything Mom's not. She actually has a career, makes money. It'll be so cool to have her around. Exactly, my thoughts too. And once your mother is out of the way, we can live as we want. Miranda is eager to move in, start fresh with us. My heart pounded, the room spun, a carousel of betrayal and shock. I leaned against the wall, my legs weak, my breath shallow. This wasn't a conversation, it was a conspiracy. My family wasn't just slipping away from me, they were sprinting. I stumbled back downstairs, my mind racing, terror and disbelief jockeying for position. By the time I reached the living room, my legs gave out, and I collapsed onto the sofa, my breaths coming in jagged pulls. I must have looked a sight because when Emily came down later, her brow furrowed slightly, a crack in her usual indifferent armor. Mom, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Her voice, tinged with faux concern, made my stomach churn. I couldn't confront her, not yet. I needed time, a plan. But what? Just tired, honey. Very tired. I managed, my voice a hollow echo of normalcy. Okay, well, if you need something, I guess let me know. She shrugged, her detachment reassembling itself like armor as she turned away, leaving me adrift in the sea of my turmoil. Sunlight was already sneaking through the curtains when I woke up, my mind a tangled mess of dreams and nightmares, all mixing together until I couldn't tell one from the other. For a fleeting moment, I hoped that what I'd overheard last night was just another bad dream. I shuffled into the kitchen, still in my nightgown, my thoughts as disheveled as my hair. Richard and Emily were already there, their morning routine in full swing as if our world hadn't just shifted on its axis. Morning, I mumbled, reaching for the coffee pot. The strong aroma did nothing to clear the fog in my brain. Good morning, Mom, Emily said, a little too cheerfully. Richard just nodded, his eyes glued to his phone. But then, their eyes met, and they shared a quick, secretive smile, a small, poisonous thing that didn't reach their eyes. That smile, it was like a slap, waking me up better than the strongest coffee ever could. They didn't know I'd seen it, but it was all the confirmation I needed that last night wasn't a figment of my imagination. I'm heading to the shelter today. Lots to do, I announced, trying to keep my voice steady. They barely acknowledged it, just nods and mumbles, their minds obviously elsewhere. As soon as breakfast was over, I made my way to the little cafe down the street where I'd agreed to meet Mark. The whole walk there, my heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear the morning bustle around me. Mark was already there when I arrived, his face lighting up in a smile when he saw me. "Mom, are you okay? You look, I don't know, upset?" I forced a smile, but as I sat down, the facade crumbled. "Mark, I need to tell you something important," I started, my voice a shaky whisper. I told him everything, about the overheard conversation, the plans, the chilling disregard they had for me. Mark listened, his face hardening with every word. "Mom, are you sure you heard right? Maybe it was out of context?" I nodded, tears spilling over, despite my best efforts to keep them in check. "No, it was clear. They want me gone, Mark. What am I going to do?" He reached across the table, taking my hands in his. Okay, let's not panic. We'll sort this out. I'll call Dave's dad, he's a private detective. He can help us get to the bottom of this." True to his word, Mark pulled out his phone and dialed right there, explaining the situation in low, urgent tones. Within minutes, he'd arranged for us to meet the detective. We went to the detective's office, a cramped little space filled with files and the faint smell of old coffee. The detective, a grizzled man with sharp eyes, listened to my story without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back, steepling his fingers. "This is serious, Mrs. Thompson. If what you're saying is true, we need to act quickly, but discreetly. I'll need some time to investigate, look into your husband's finances, his movements, check for any evidence of this woman he's involved with." Back home, I slipped back into my role, the doting wife and mother, my heart heavy, my smile forced. Richard and Emily were none the wiser, caught up in their own secretive world. Every look, every whisper between them felt like a knife twisting deeper, but I bore it silently, waiting for the day I could confront them with the truth, armed with more than just my broken heart. When the call came from the detective, my heart was pounding so hard I could barely hold the phone steady. "Mrs. Thompson, we need to talk. It's urgent," he said, his voice a low rumble of seriousness that sent shivers down my spine. I agreed to meet him immediately, and Mark, sensing the gravity, decided to come along. We met at a nondescript coffee shop, a place where conversations could disappear into the hum of daily grind. The detective looked graver than the last time we'd seen him, his eyes sharp and assessing as we sat down. "Mrs. Thompson, we've uncovered quite a bit," he began, flipping open a small notebook brimming with notes. "Your husband's psychologist, if we can even call her that without spitting, is more than just a therapist. She's his lover, and they've been seeing each other for over a year." The words stung, each one a lash against the already raw edges of my betrayal. Mark's hand found mine under the table, a lifeline in the storm. "They're planning to get married," the detective continued. "And they don't plan on leaving you with much." How could he do this?" I whispered, my voice barely a thread of sound. "That's not even the worst part," the detective said grimly. "They've been drugging you. The lady friend suggested it, to make you appear unstable. They're using a powerful sedative, adding it to your tea. This would explain any memory lapses or confusion you've experienced recently." A cold dread settled over me, a fog so dense it threatened to choke. My own home, my sanctuary had become a trap. "The plan is to have you declared mentally unfit. They've even roped in some crooked doctors who would testify to your instability for a price," he added, his voice a blend of anger and pity. I felt sick, the coffee shop spinning around me. "My daughter, does she know about this?" "Yes, she's involved." His confirmation was a bullet, straight through whatever shred of hope I had left that Emily was still my little girl. We left the meeting with a plan simmering between us. At home, Richard greeted me with a cup of my favorite tea, his smile too sweet, too venomous. I took the cup with a trembling hand, my heart pounding against my chest like it wanted out. "Here, love, I made it just how you like it," Richard said, watching me with eyes I no longer recognized. "Thank you," I murmured, my voice a mask of normalcy over the scream inside. I waited for him to turn back to his newspaper, then I quietly poured the tea into the plant next to my chair, watching the liquid disappear into the soil. For the next several weeks, I played the part of the forgetful wife perfectly. I'd misplace keys, forget names, stumble over words. Richard and Emily watched with poorly veiled triumph, not knowing that with each act, I was silently sealing their fate. Richard's birthday was looming like a storm on the horizon. He had taken it upon himself to organize a lavish party, claiming it was because he couldn't trust me, the woman who couldn't remember the simplest things. "You're staying at home, Sarah," he had said with a patronizing tone that morning. "It's for the best, you know, with your condition." I nodded, a meek, submissive smile plastered on my face, while rage and resolve warred within me. "Of course, Richard. I wouldn't want to ruin your big day." As soon as the door shut behind Richard and Emily, my act dropped. I was on the phone with Mark within seconds. "It's time," I said, my voice a mix of nerves and determination. "I'm on my way, Mom. We'll show them," he replied, his tone as steely as mine felt. Dressed inconspicuously, we drove to the venue. The restaurant was buzzing with Richard's colleagues, friends, and even his well-groomed mistress, all gathered to celebrate. We slipped in unnoticed, taking cover behind a large pillar, just as Richard grabbed the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me on this special day," he began, his voice dripping with faux humility. "Sadly, Sarah couldn't make it tonight. She's not been herself lately," he sighed, the crowd murmuring their sympathy. But, on a brighter note, his smile widened. "I've just been offered my own evening show on a major channel. It's a dream come true." The room erupted in applause, people clinking glasses as Richard basked in the adulation. That was our cue. I felt Mark's hand on my shoulder, squeezing gently. We moved toward the stage, my heart thumping in my chest like a drum. Just as the applause died down, we stepped into the light. Richard's face went from joyous to ashen in seconds, his eyes wide with shock. Mark didn't hesitate. He strode up and smoothly took the microphone from Richard's hand. "If I could have your attention, please," he announced. The room fell silent, all eyes on us. "I have a special gift for my father and his beloved," Mark continued, his voice calm but loud. A projector whirred to life behind us, and images flooded the screen, photos of Richard and his mistress, their intimacy undeniable. Whispers crescendoed into gasps as video clips rolled, their cozy dinners, their sneaky exits from her apartment. Then the audio played, clear and damning, discussions of drugging me, of bribing doctors, all to steal my place in this house, in this family. Richard and his mistress exchanged desperate looks, trapped by their own deceit. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a mix of shock and anger vibrating through the air. I took the microphone from Mark, my hand steady, despite the turmoil around us. "I am not as ill as my husband hoped," I declared, my voice strong and clear. What you see on this screen, I arranged for this gift, especially for his mistress." The scandal erupted right then and there, the mistress fleeing the room with Richard stumbling after her. As the room buzzed with the aftershock, one of Richard's relatives approached me. "I recorded everything, Sarah. It's all on video. I'll send it to you," he whispered, handing me his business card. After the explosive reveal at Richard's birthday bash, the fallout was immediate and merciless. The video of his betrayal and scheming went viral overnight, replayed on every gossip show and news outlet you could think of. Richard, who had always craved the spotlight, finally got his wish, though not in the way he had hoped. The backlash was swift. His once promising career on television crumbled, the network dropped him like a hot potato, citing moral clauses and public outrage. Meanwhile, I took steps to untangle myself from the man I once vowed to stand by. My lawyer was a godsend, a no-nonsense woman who cut through the legal jargon and helped me file for divorce. The evidence was overwhelming, and the court had no qualms in granting me not only the divorce, but also a hefty financial compensation from Richard and his mistress. The fact that they had drugged me made it a criminal matter, too, but my focus was on severing ties, not extending court battles. Sarah, you've secured lifelong alimony, and the house is yours. They can't touch you financially anymore, my lawyer announced with a satisfied smirk when it was all over. The mistress, Miranda, a once respected psychologist, saw her career disintegrate. Her license was revoked following an investigation into her unethical behavior. The doctors she colluded with faced similar fates, their medical licenses stripped and reputations tarnished. With no career and mounting legal fees, Miranda sold her office and took out loans to fulfill the court's compensation orders. Last I heard, she and Richard were living together in a cramped apartment, struggling to make ends meet. Karma, as they say, can be quite the equalizer. During all this upheaval, my daughter Emily came to me, tears in her eyes, remorse finally breaking through her previously cold demeanor. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I was so wrong. Can I stay with you?" Her words stung, reopening wounds that had barely started to heal. "Emily, I love you. You're my daughter, and that will never change. But you chose to side with your father, knowing what he planned for me. I think it's time you learn what real consequences feel like." She moved out the next day, her belongings stuffed into too many bags, her shoulders slumped under the weight of her choices. Last I heard, she was living with Richard and Miranda, the atmosphere there as strained as one would expect. Richard tried to reach out once, a call I let go to voicemail. His message was a mix of self-pity and blame, a cocktail I no longer had the taste for. "Sarah, I hope we can talk. There are things I need to explain," the voice said, trailing off into a sigh. I deleted the message, the final note of his voice swept away with a single tap. After everything that went down, here I am, back in the world of dogs, my first love and passion. I'm not just working at the shelter anymore, I've started offering private dog training courses right here at home. My backyard has transformed into a haven for all things canine, agility equipment, training mats, and more toys than you can shake a stick at. "Mom, this place looks amazing," Mark said on one of his frequent visits. He walked around with a proud smile as he watched me put a rowdy pup through its paces. "Thanks, honey. It feels right, you know? Like I've found my way back to where I was always meant to be," I replied, tossing a ball for an overly enthusiastic golden retriever. The scandal, though a nightmare at the time, strangely did wonders for my business. Clients started pouring in, some admittedly curious about the scandal, but they stayed for the results. "I'll be honest, Sarah, I first heard about you from the news," one of my clients, a friendly woman with a stubborn dachshund, confessed during a session. "But I saw how you handled Bella here, and I knew the news wasn't the real story. You're the real deal." I laughed, giving Bella an affectionate pat as she finally nailed the sit-stay command we'd been working on. "I appreciate that. It's good to know my 15 minutes of fame brought me some genuinely nice clients." It's not all about dogs, though. Mark comes around a lot, helping me with the heavier tasks around the yard, his company a constant reminder of how much good there still is in my life. "Mom, you ever think about how things turned out? You know, after everything?" Mark asked one afternoon as we sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. "All the time," I admitted, sipping my tea. "It was tough, really tough. But look at this, I'm happy, Mark. Really happy. I wouldn't change a thing." He nodded, a knowing grin spreading across his face. "I'm proud of you, Mom. You turned a mess into a message." And he's right. I did. I get to spend my days doing what I love, surrounded by wagging tails and wet noses. The peace and contentment that fills my days now is something I used to dream about during those dark times. "Hey, Mom, think you'll ever forgive him?" "Dad, I mean?" Mark asked one evening, the question hanging in the air like smoke. I thought about it, really thought about it. I've moved on, but forgive? Not. And that's okay. I've learned that some things you just have to let be. That's the truth of it. I found strength I never knew I had, and a resilience that's seen me through the worst of storms. The days are long, filled with barks and laughs, and as I close the gate each evening, I look up at the stars, grateful for the quiet ending to another day filled with life.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. president of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their inn. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.